Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us today for our MDICx webinar. I'm thrilled to be able to introduce today's topic, Making the Business Case for Quality, some reports from the MDIC Case for Quality Competencies Working Group. My name is Stephanie Christopher. I'm a program manager at MDIC for our Case for Quality initiative, and I have been entrusted with this project very recently, just in the last 3 months or so, but as a long-term employee of MDIC, I've long been aware of the tremendous work that all of our Case for Quality working groups have been working on in this area. And Pat Shafer will give us a little bit of a background on the Case for Quality when he starts his presentation. But the Case for Quality actually predates the existence of MDIC. This has been an initiative and a priority of FDA and CDRH since 2011. So we're thrilled to be able to continue to play a role in this important initiative. Our two speakers today are the co-leads from our Case for Quality Competencies Working Group, and they're going to be sharing the output of their group's activities in 2016 on establishing the value of quality and some management review guidance. In the reminders that you received about the webinar, you saw that there was also a link to the draft papers, which are available on the MDIC website, and we encourage you to review those papers and to provide any feedback that you may have based both on today's presentation and on the review of those papers. So with that, I am happy to turn control over to Pat Shafer from Deloitte, who's going to be giving our first part of our presentation today. Pat?
Great. Stephanie, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be presenting. Pat, Baird, and I were both facilitators. Really, the group was comprised of many different folks from the med tech industry, as well as representatives from the FDA, and also healthcare providers in terms of hospital health systems. So we are informed not only about the impact of poor quality and good quality on the manufacturers, but also on the broader healthcare ecosystem. The first of the two white papers is entitled Value of Quality, subtitled Good Quality is Good Business. And this is really taking a look at not only how to reduce the impacts of poor quality, but also how to gain positive advantage from investments in quality. By positive advantage, we're talking increased revenues, increased market share, and all those good things. Our expectation is that after participating in this discussion, I think there'll be some Q&A at the end. You should be able to understand and communicate the importance of measuring the financial costs and benefits. It's easy to count kappas and deviations, but to translate that into financial impact is where we really get the attention of senior leadership and can start to justify those investments. We'll also identify the different types of costs and their impacts on stakeholders up and down the value chain, which means within the med tech community itself, but also what happens to your customers. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the steps required to implement an effective value of quality program within your organization. And again, I want to emphasize that this is not one person's thinking, but rather a team of folks representing, at probably the height, maybe 15 med tech manufacturers throughout the course of the project, which spanned, I believe, 18 months, if my memory serves me well. So, as Stephanie mentioned, the Case for Quality was launched back in 2011 following an in-depth review of device quality data. Some of the observations that came from that were mostly around increasing productivity and internal performance, such as more productivity, fewer complaints and investigations, perhaps a smaller quality organization, and lower quality-related costs. So we're not really touching on the upside yet, but just reducing the cost of poor quality in this initial study However, conceptually at least, firms with an established quality culture are able to use that capacity gained by not having to spend so much time putting out fires to really look at opportunities to accelerate device design, drive innovation, and introduce products to market sooner. So our hypothesis in this is that quality pays big dividends. Some of the challenges, and I won't go through this in too much detail, really lack of transparency to the impact of poor quality across the ecosystem is a big piece of it. Another perception is that the regulatory framework, in other words, being compliant, doesn't necessarily align with improved market performance, that good quality is not good compliance. Good quality is basically coming up with a quality product that drives market performance and is also safer and more effective for patients. So we want to keep this tied to patient outcomes as well. I believe it was about 2 years ago, although again my memory is a little foggy, the CDRH partnered with the MDIC, and then MDIC engaged the work streams, of which there were 4. The initial one, the primary focus was around a quality capability maturity model, which assesses the capability of any company's quality system. The idea is that companies that can demonstrate greater maturity, aside from enjoying the benefits of a mature quality capability, might also have a reduced regulatory inspection burden. But again, this is all work in process, and that is the outcome of that particular work stream. There was a metrics work stream. There was an advanced analytics work stream, which really supports evaluation of medical device quality to the benefit of the value assessment committees within hospital systems. And then finally, our competency working group, and we'll go into more detail now. So the competency working group was started. As I said, there were some 15, maybe 18 groups or participants representing industry, the FDA, and hospital systems. And the first step was to identify what a competency model, basically. We identified the stakeholder groups that would be within that. You can see that we got to a fair amount of granularity within the manufacturing end of it, but we also looked at regulators, providers, payers, and others, as well as patients. And then we identified a total of 24 different competencies within 4 competency groups. Certainly regulatory awareness, quality execution, understanding value, and soft skills. So basically, after defining that model, we decided that that was not one size fits all, and that we should do some analysis of which competencies are most important for which stakeholder groups. And we created a heat map with the greatest importance being the darker green. And this is just a high-level summary. We actually broke it down, each competency by each stakeholder, for a total of over 1,000 different pairs scored low to high. Then we identified what the current state was and where the biggest gaps were. And then from that, basically ranked what we felt was the greatest priority. And so what we did as a competency group was define first that model, and then the participants voted, and understanding value, understanding the cost of poor quality was the top scoring topic, the top scoring competency. And so we decided that that would be our first task, is to come with a broader definition and capability around cost of poor quality very early on. And I'll be referring to cost of poor quality and value of quality almost interchangeably. Certainly the initial focus is on identifying the cost of poor quality, but really we need to be turning the conversation to the value of quality, and so you'll understand that as we go through. So we had two deliverables. One was a white paper, which we're going to go through, and the other was a cost of poor quality dashboard, which is actually, if I'm not mistaken, also available on the MDIC website, which is actually an Excel model that allows you to get a jump start on implementing a value of quality or cost of poor quality capability. The white paper, though, we'll talk about first, is intended for many different levels, certainly leaders, managers who are making investment decisions, so key decision makers, as well as quality professionals and employees, all of whom are impacted in some way by quality and safety of medtech products and services. So this is both for the senior level decision makers as well as for the quality professionals who implement quality programs. Our outcome is very similar to the learning objectives we discussed, and we'll go through the content right now. So the first thing we wanted to do was come up with a vision. It's not just about cost avoidance. We really wanted to establish this concept of the value of quality and talk to some degree about what some of the benefits were in terms of competitive advantage. I think an interesting note is that the unique device identifier is actually part of the clinical data set in many hospital systems. And so hospitals, the customers, are now able to relate performance to any given, in a therapeutic setting, to any given device. And this data is starting to build up so that medtech products will actually develop a reputation backed by empirical evidence as to their quality and efficacy and safety. We also believe that good quality will drive customer loyalty. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that can be measured. It's less precise, perhaps, than the failure costs, but nonetheless, we feel it's important to measure that. And then the FDA has been talking quite a bit about, and this is not final, it's still in process, is basically for those companies that demonstrate quality either through the maturity model or through empirical evidence, perhaps a reduced inspection burden given the move to risk-based inspections and the importance of being able to really focus inspectors on those areas where the greatest risk resides. The return on investment, we all agreed, may take some time to materialize, but there might be a number of scenarios where the benefits might be immediate, particularly if you're able to retain or keep failure costs inside the organization. In other words, focus on reducing external failure costs might have some immediate impact, substantial impact. And then our other thought is that measuring and reporting and acting upon these financial measures will help manufacturers prioritize investment in quality programs. So, as I mentioned, the first step, once we had chosen the cost of poor quality as a key topic, was to identify what those costs were. And we did several things. We surveyed during our biweekly phone calls on what the typical failure costs would be. And, you know, all the usual suspects, scrap, rework, and the external costs such as recalls and complaints. But we did end up with some, I think, 40 or more costs. They're all outlined in the white paper that really would fall under this area. The next thing we did and then we prioritized these, and ultimately the higher priority costs or failure costs are included in the dashboard that we'll look at later. We also surveyed providers, heads of health systems, and really many of the med tech industry folks who were on the calls were quite surprised to learn the extent of impact of poor quality in terms of procedures that have to be canceled, in terms of extra inventory that needs to be acquired just to have sufficient working hospital equipment available. In terms of legal fees, insurance, some of the costs, if there was a procedure that was clearly identified as a result of having to be redone because of poor quality of a medical device, those costs were then transferred back directly to the manufacturers. So a huge impact in terms of the providers and also the patients in terms of not only just safety, but in terms of having to repeat procedures and the substantial costs associated with that. And then finally, the FDA, we had an inspector who was a lead within one of the regions within the U.S. Go through and actually get some very accurate information on the costs to the public based on the amount of effort that the FDA has to apply to address quality issues, including increased inspection burden and follow-up and other things. Now, some of these costs are passed right back to the manufacturers, but some of them do not get passed back, and so there's a system-wide impact as well. Going a step further, we took a look at the different types of quality metrics that we would like to include. You know, certainly the costs of poor quality we've already discussed, and the costs of poor quality are what are embedded in that dashboard to help leadership and quality professionals understand the impact of failure costs. There are also costs related to investment in good quality. So for, you know, not half, but some of your costs will be failure costs, some of your costs will be the investment in your quality system, the salaries that you pay, the tools that you buy, the third-party inspections, et cetera, that assure quality to the degree possible. And then the third category is the other side of the equation, which is the benefits of good quality. You know, and again, our belief is that these benefits far outweigh the costs. However, they are harder to quantify. One of the, and we had very interesting discussions on these calls. Again, we met for 2 hours every other week, and I think we had one entire session devoted to this concept of looking at good quality the investments versus the cost of poor quality. Certainly the total cost of quality is the failure costs plus the investments in your quality management system. At one point, one of the participants put out a graph that really is sort of demonstrates the break-even point, or the optimal balance between cost and investment, and that at some point you get to a point where there's diminishing returns, or even your total cost of quality go up with continued investment in good quality. We elected not to include this in the dashboard, primarily because, you know, this might apply to widgets, but when it comes to patient safety, the concept of good enough is not really relevant. And in fact, if you decide to stop investing in quality simply because your investments are equal to your costs and that you're not going to get incremental cost reduction, you're going to be missing the benefits of an effective quality system. You're not going to distinguish yourself among your competition, and you're not addressing all those external costs that happen beyond the four walls of the company, downstream in the provider area, nor are you considering patient safety and patient benefit. So we specifically decided not to go into any detail or even address this break-even point when it comes to costs and costs of quality. So I should have pushed that earlier. Some of the failure costs, just as an FYI, and again, I don't think we need to go into detail here, but there are the internal costs that happen inside the company, the cost of scrap, spoilage, redesign, disposal of defective products. All of these really are self-contained, and typically there's very little visibility of these costs outside of your company. On the other hand, the external failure costs are felt downstream, and the external failure costs impact reputation. They impact customers. So things such as recalls, warranty, repairs, and replacements. These are still costs that the manufacturer incurs, but they have impact beyond the manufacturer. And so one of the strategies might be to really try to drive down external failure costs and leave the internal failure costs to later. They may be so closely related, though, that you really need to look at it more holistically. Well, some of the challenges, though, well, the challenges are huge, as a matter of fact. The accounting systems are typically complex, and just being able to measure cost related to quality is difficult. It could be that accounting systems aren't granular enough to really get down to a product level or a plant level. So really the availability of data is one of the first hurdles. A second piece is that the external costs are often difficult. And one example that arose during the calls was the concept of the call center being a cost, and it's pretty easy to measure the cost of the call center, but you know, and people often focus cost reduction efforts on making the call center more efficient, spending less time on a call, fewer escalations within the tiers of service, that sort of thing. But companies aren't really looking at design improvements and other ways of eliminating the calls in the first place. So that's one of the observations. I think Pat Baird also had some thoughts and other experiences he'd like to present. Yeah. Pat?
Thank you very much. I actually want to give some of the background of these few bullet points about invisible costs and the example of the call center. This actually came from my real-world experience. I was supporting some products that were out in the field, and for one particular product that we were still manufacturing, there was a high complaint rate from customers. It wasn't a compliance issue. It wasn't a safety issue at all. It was a customer satisfaction issue. And I wanted to do what's right for the customer and fix this thing, but I had a hard time convincing the business that this is something that needs to be addressed. Again, because it's not compliance, it's not safety, it's something that I believed would reduce costs, but I had a hard time. I couldn't point to, oh, I'm switching suppliers, which is a lower cost supplier. It was very difficult to make that case initially. I took a step back, and I actually approached the call center, and I said, I wonder what this is costing us, having this customer frustration. I'm not talking about loss of goodwill. I'm not talking about future sales that are in jeopardy. I'm saying just flat out, what is our direct labor cost to answer the phone? And the gentleman who was running the call center didn't know. And so we sat down and took a look at what's his annual budget and how many complaints does he get per year. So, you know, excluding CAPAs, excluding follow-ups, excluding other things, just plain and simple, how much does it cost us to answer the phone every time someone's calling in with this particular complaint? I got that number, then I approached the design team and say, what would it take to take and address this issue? And then I was able to pitch to management and show, you know, if we fix this customer satisfaction issue, I'm going to save the company, or I should say the payback is going to be in less than 24 months. And so although I'm not necessarily saving my cost center, I'm saving the whole company more money. This is a place that we should take and invest. And no one had ever viewed it this way before. And that was really eye-opening to me of, wow, this was pretty straightforward, and it was pretty simple to put together these kind of numbers. I didn't have to take and argue with anyone on what the projected lost sales were, what the loss of goodwill was. Those would be extra benefits, but I was able to make a very, very simple business case out of this. Right back to Pat Shafer.
Great, thanks, Pat. Another real-world example of quality in terms of compounding of costs, we had one company that basically, the words here say that they failed to detect the contaminants. The fact is that they did see the contaminants, but they considered the contaminants to be immaterial, inconsequential to the quality of the product, and so basically decided to let the batch go. That decision was a very costly decision, basically resulting in no health issues. There was no adverse reactions related to the contaminants, which were actually particulates. However, there were a flood of complaints, and as Pat just explained, those complaints cost money, but it also resulted in the recall of the product, a warning letter, and significant remediation costs. And so basically that decision not to withhold the batch, while in the short term seemed expedient, had a profound impact on quarterly results for sure. We said that it's difficult to measure benefit, and indeed the dashboard that we're going to show in a moment does not have the benefit side in it. However, it can be done, and in fact at one of the more recent MDIC forums where we had CIOs and CEOs, not CIOs, CEOs present, there was a lot of talk about some of the tools that are out there to measure benefit. In fact, one of the examples was that if your sales force is producing X amount of revenue each year, imagine that same sales force, if they could reduce their time spent addressing quality issues and increase their productivity by 30%, you know, what would you do with 30% increased revenues if you look at it that way? You know, there are ways of measuring customer satisfaction. There are a lot of companies that do win-loss analysis of bids after the fact, sort of a lessons learned post the sales cycle that can be very effective. And of course, reduction in complaints and complaint processing costs, reduction in health authority findings, and of course the follow-on impact of a health authority finding. The finding itself is just the tip of the iceberg. And we also know from several anecdotes that when you do have findings, basically your credibility with the authority is decreased, and when that happens, the level of scrutiny increases. This is all related to risk-based inspections. And then, of course, we spoke to the hospital systems, legal costs, insurance, and other pass-through procedural costs are very significant. And also, when the hospital suffers legal consequence and insurance increases, they certainly think twice before they buy that device again. So, you know, controlling this and measuring the downstream impact is extremely important, even if it's not precise. So we're going to talk a little bit about the dashboard. I'm going to actually jump ahead one slide and then go back. The dashboard that was created is an Excel-based tool. It was actually created by someone from Baxter. I think it's worth mentioning that you know, we should thank Baxter for their time and effort in producing this dashboard. Dorota Woolpuck was the person who actually put this together, and it's a very comprehensive spreadsheet that allows you to capture all of the different internal and external failure costs. It can be broken down by plant and also by product. And she made allowance for, I think, 5 different plants and 5 different products. I'm not sure exactly. The point is that it's all there. The computations are there so that you can aggregate costs and track costs over a period of 3 years. Now, it's not expected that any company is going to take this and directly use it necessarily to enable cost of poor quality dashboard, although they might. It's certainly ready for use like that. However, the expectation is that each company's plant, ecosystem and product count is going to be slightly different. Maybe if you have dozens or hundreds of products, you'll want to focus on your top 5 products. But in any event, it's a great baseline for implementing a cost of poor quality dashboard that is available to folks through the MDIC. There is structured data entry. Right now, the provision is that you would basically cut and paste the information from the financial system, but there's no reason why your IT team couldn't develop APIs or some sort of a ETL extraction, translation, and load piece to automatically populate many of these metrics. The spreadsheet is also very powerful. It has a pivot table capability which allows you to control for various factors or variables and do what-if analysis and root cause analysis. And also, by way of the fact that you're capturing these costs over an extended period of time, it's a rolling 3-year window, you're able to look at trends and also outliers and basically help focus efforts on quality remediation and quality improvement. So I think, you know, this is a tremendous asset that's available to everyone and would give everyone a jump start on creating a cost of poor quality dashboard. Some of the challenges, though, as we mentioned, are capturing those metrics. More mature companies may be in a position to do automatic polls, but we also know that a lot of the industry you know, would be forced to capture these things. In fact, many of the reports that we see in industry right now are basically pulled from systems, put into Excel, and then cut and pasted into PowerPoint. So this is an opportunity to really automate a lot of that. The other thing that we wanted to mention again is that the dashboard is really a failure cost or cost of poor quality dashboard. It does help prioritize. It does give tremendous visibility to the cost of quality, but we also think that it's helpful for companies to look at the upside or the benefit as well. We also talked a little bit earlier about some of the challenges in terms of allocation, that costs are recorded in one way, but they may not be able to be broken down by site or by product. So that's something that may require some negotiation with the financial groups to help better understand how costs are allocated. And also that's another factor, is that many of the costs might be allocated and not captured as specific costs, such as labor may be an allocation as opposed to a specific cost that you can attribute to a failure or a quality remediation. We're going to be, in fact, Pat Baird is going to be talking about management review in just a couple of minutes, but one of the key issues is when you're measuring cost of poor quality, what do you do with that information? And the management review, as Pat will explain, is a wonderful opportunity to leverage cost of poor quality metrics. The view is that, one other case study, which I think is very interesting. We were working with one client who basically had a dashboard, a quality dashboard, and they rolled up the quality metric into one number, and anybody who came in the morning to work would see that yesterday's number up on the homepage of their intranet. And basically the functionality was you were able to, if it was low or you were concerned, you could click on it and drill down and identify exactly where the quality issue was and why the quality number for the day was as low as it was. So the ability to build analytics into the dashboard and to do that root cause analysis really raised awareness of quality within the company. It was part of their overall corporate strategy. Quality was a cornerstone of that, and every employee was aware of how well the company was doing on any given day. So that very good example of fostering a culture of quality through reporting of the quality metrics. And it's our view that the cost of poor quality should be shared with everyone who's responsible for designing, manufacturing, distributing, and even in any way associated with the device. The investment in good quality, again, we did not want to focus on this because we were more concerned about people identifying the cost rather than deciding when too much investment was the case, but we do address it in the white paper. The cost of poor quality felt really is where senior leadership should be focused on reducing those costs. However, quality professionals do have an interest in understanding the productivity of their investments, and so there, the investment in good quality is relevant because you want to make sure that your investments are optimized, that your a dollar spent is well spent when it comes to improving the quality management system. Pat, you have another case study that you wanted to bring to bear here.
Sure, thank you. And in fact, this second part that I'm going to discuss is actually sort of the framework for that enabled that first story. We're talking about reporting the investment costs, and one thing I wanted to make sure folks weren't doing is analysis paralysis. My background's as an engineer, and we had a database of about 100 different projects that people had suggested to reduce costs or improve the quality of our products. And so I remember facing this database, and the first thing we started doing is trying to put together the business case for each one of these, so we can give a priority ranking to the business on what it would take to implement each of these. And we immediately dug in and started making extremely detailed project plans for each one of these 100 different suggestions. And obviously that was going nowhere fast. It was taking us way too long to get through each and every detailed plan, and we had to build in a lot of assumptions. When we went to go look up the costs for things, we found out nobody knew what those costs were, so we'd have to have negotiations back and forth. Eventually, I saw that we were spending a lot of time and not getting any value out of trying to do this. So instead, we switched directions a bit, and I sort of came up with a list of standard costs that anytime you want to change the design, at a minimum, you're going to incur X thousands of dollars of impact just to open up a change package and start processing it. And then had some other standard costs sort of built into there. With that, we were able to very quickly go through, the 100 top suggestions that we had, and come out with a series of clear winners, clear losers, and sort of a gray zone in between that needed more detail. Some of the clear winners, the payback, my ROI was less than a year. Some of the clear losers, I remember one where my payback on my investments wouldn't happen for 50 years. So even if I'm off by an order of magnitude on all of, both of my estimates, the 50-year project, even if it could pay me back in 5, that still means that less than 1 year project is probably going to be a better bet. And so it was very interesting to me that to make the business case, or to just even educate ourselves about the value of some of these projects, I didn't have to get into that much detail. Now, for some, particularly in the gray zone, people would challenge us, and we'd go back and do more detailed product plans or project plans, as we should. But I just wanted to make sure that when people are starting to dig into these costs, they don't get too obsessed with the details, and they need to scale their work appropriately.
Great. Thank you, Pat. It is confusing both being named Pat. We ran into that many times during our calls. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through the rest of this. I want to give plenty of time for Pat to talk about management review, which is really the realization of the metrics that we're talking about now, and also plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So basically, it's almost like a systems development lifecycle. There's a change management piece of raising awareness and getting people to the point where they would like to embark on this journey. There's a robust design process where you define the metrics, the process, and also what types of technology you're going to use to execute this. Certainly planning is key, and then finally piloting. Our belief is that it's very important to do a low impact smaller pilot just to test conceptually how well it's working, and then build off the success of that pilot. From a design perspective, we believe in this concept of people, process, and technology, and then also data as well. There is a huge cultural element in building and enabling this. Also, you will have to have people buy into it because it may result in changes to accounting and financial systems in order to help support this, or at least some level of allocation, and getting people to agree on allocations is somewhat of an art as well. There are processes for collecting and reporting the metrics, and certainly, again, management review is one of those processes. And then finally, deciding what level of technology you're going to use to enable this. At a minimum, it's going to be manually collecting data from a report from finance and pasting it into the dashboard that you're able to take advantage of. We mentioned piloting. Typically, companies develop a very structured pilot that allows them to really pressure test the process and make sure that the metrics that are coming out are able to be used in an effective way, in an appropriate forum. And then also, from an automation perspective, the degree to which this can be automated is going to make it much less painful. So looking forward to automation is an important part of the planning process. And then once you've done it, sustaining it. The metrics must be clearly defined and granular and apply. It's important for them to be standardized across the enterprise. You may find that as you mature with this process, the metrics change. You might get into more predictive metrics and support some predictive analytics. Again, we talked about automating the framework and then governance, really making sure that these metrics are utilized effectively, whether it's at the senior leadership level or at the quality group level, and that there is clear definition of roles and responsibilities, and that the metrics continue to have meaning within the organization. So a couple quick lessons learned. Trying to get all of the metrics may be, there may be diminishing returns there. So as Pat mentioned in his case study, really focusing on the vital few that's going to drive the appropriate behavior. Don't go too crazy trying to get metrics for things that you just don't track or keep metrics for. Keep the metrics simple and easy to understand, and understand that it will take some effort, especially not only to launch it, but to keep it going. So this should not be an initiative or an effort that is going to take so much time and effort that it's counterproductive. One good practice is to, once you've identified the impact of a project and its corresponding reduction in cost of poor quality, use those savings to finance additional projects to really drive quality throughout the organization. Recognize that investing in an initiative like this is probably in competition with other initiatives, and so there needs to be a clearly articulated business case or value proposition. Again, we're talking about cost of poor quality. It's easy to talk about CAPAs and deviation counts and lengths of time to close CAPAs. This needs to be translated into financial terms so that there's clear visibility and understanding of the impact, which is sometimes very surprisingly large. And then the other thing is to make sure that appropriate action is taken when some of these issues are surfaced. So I think, Pat, I'm going to turn it over to you. Stephanie will do, I guess, Q&A at the end, but I'll release control of the slides to Pat.
Terrific. Thank you, Pat. And I will just give me one moment here, and we'll make sure and give Pat Baird control of the keyboard.
And while you're doing that, I just want to, again, thank, not by mentioning names, but just thank all of the participants from industry who basically contributed to the cost of poor quality and value of quality deliverables. It was a very engaged group and very rewarding.
Terrific. Thank you, Pat. Pat Baird, you should have control of the keyboard now.
All right, thank you. And it seems to not be like, there we go. Sorry, wasn't working for a second. So then I'm going to talk about a management review guidance that this same team had taken and put together. And first I want to take a step back a little bit and go back and revisit a topic that Pat Shafer had brought up early on when the competency group was trying to determine where is it we should take and focus our efforts. We felt that we'd be able to get 2 projects through in the amount of time that we had. And something that was mentioned before was that we had a heat map that sort of showed what areas did we think had the biggest gaps between where we need to be versus where we think we are, just as a whole. And one thing that emerged in taking a look at the red areas, the biggest gaps, was that there were either rows or columns often with lots of red. And so that would tell us a row with a lot of red said, that competency is a gap needed for a lot of different roles. And the vertical columns said, there's some roles that are missing a lot of competencies. And so there were these, islands of these collections together. And a very common theme across them was that topic of invisibility, the costs and benefits of quality being very hidden. And there's a need not only to be able to take and measure quality, but to be able to communicate it. And so we thought that, that might be a nice complement to the cost of poor quality, in addition to being able to enable frontline quality managers to better measure what their cost of quality is. Why don't we also take a look at C-suite and take a look at management review, and can we help them do a better job at peering into their organization and seeing where those costs are? So can we attack this problem from both sides? Another thing that I kind of liked about management review is I was talking to different organizations and how they hold their management review meetings is something that I call management review theater. And by this I mean that they had a meeting that was called management review, and there was a script, and there were costumes, and there were props, but none of it was real. People weren't getting to the real root issues. Instead, they just had the pomp and circumstance so that they could say, yes, we do hold periodic management reviews. And we wanted to see if we can take and discourage that behavior and move toward what someone on the team called endoscopic management reviews. And I've had to explain this story about a dozen times or so by now, and I've never had to explain what was meant by endoscopic management reviews. I think most people get that it's telling you where the issues are directly. So that was sort of our overall goal, is to move from theater to endoscopes. So following a similar pattern to cost of poor quality, we developed a management review guidance. What does an effective management review look like? What are some of those roles and responsibilities? The audience was targeting C-suite, but also the quality management and the folks that have to put together the materials that are presented at management review. Better quality communications is our intended outcome. The more people can see that impact and understand, the better it's going to be. And we had a few different sections in that white paper about the value proposition, particularly some challenges, some suggestions for management review process, and how to get started. A little more detail on those objectives. With C-suite, we wanted to get them to have a better understanding between quality outcomes and business results. Also to help prime them on so they can know what they should expect from an effective review, not review theater, an effective review. For the quality management stakeholder, we wanted to share practices with them, some successful practices that other companies who have moved from theater to something more mature. This is how they've done it, and this is some of the successes that they've had in the past. And then also for the people developing the management review materials, what to include, how to present, how to take and tie it back to business results, understanding how to collect and just better communication. In a topic like this, it would be very easy to wax poetic and talk about this ideal process, talk about nirvana, cite standards, cite other things, and paint a very rosy but completely unrealistic picture of how things should be. What I really liked about this team was it's a very pragmatic group. It consisted of a lot of people that had been through that transformation and have been tasked with making management reviews more effective. And so I really appreciated their approach and just their history with this topic. So we wanted to create this white paper that reflected some of the leading practices and also something that's easy to implement. And you don't often get that, you know, when you're taking and developing concepts like this. One of the first things that we did was collected samples of some of the management review artifacts from companies and other sources. We, of course, you know, de-identified all of the data, so no one was sharing anything proprietary. But we had people sent in their procedures, sample presentations, templates for the meeting minutes, agendas, et cetera. And we took some of these things and compiled them into lots of useful reference tables in the guidance document. So getting back to the white paper itself, the content, there's a section where we talk about the overall vision for industry. And just as Pat Shafer said, I'm not going to sit here and read the whole slide to you. You can see that some of the things that we wanted to take and include in this vision was, you know, getting buy-in from senior management, having regularly scheduled time to take and talk about these things, discussion about what makes up a core set of very coherent metrics, rules for escalation, et cetera. We also discuss early on the management review challenges. Again, this is a very pragmatic group, and so we spent a decent amount of time talking about some of the barriers, some of the problems that there are in doing good management reviews. And some of those challenges include there not being enough time between reviews to put together all the content. It takes a while to collect the metrics from, particularly if you're working in a large organization, from a variety of different databases and different sources. Time to collect that data, time to put together the presentation, time to dig into the things that you know that the C-suite is going to be asking you and getting the story for the deeper issues. Other challenges is understanding exactly what should be covered in a management review and what isn't appropriate. Having a rationale, knowing when you should take and escalate issues up through an organization. And also, particularly when talking at the executive level, there's blurry lines between what are business reviews and what are quality reviews. It could be the same actors in the room, but the focus is a bit different. So one of the things that was highlighted, real-world lessons here, is the importance of having dependable metrics. And although you can manually collect metrics without the infrastructure support, that's going to take a lot of time. That's going to be error-prone. It's going to be, if someone's out sick, someone's got rotated to another job, some of these things could take and change. So really wanted to stress But if you can, investing in some business automation and automatically collecting as much of this information as you can, timing of your CAPAs, for example, is going to make your life a whole lot easier when it comes to building a good management review deck. And in some cases, people have pushed this to the point of having near real-time monitoring of quality systems and being able to react much quicker to issues rather than having, manually collected data that takes a while to process, compile, and therefore the data that you're looking at is several months old because it takes that long to get everything put together. We have some discussion about 4 key parts of setting up an effective management review process, including a governance model, your process model, saying specifically what are the process steps for holding those periodic reviews, definitions of which metrics you're going to be reviewing, and then what kind of outcomes do you expect? How are you taking and documenting action items? How you were making sure that follow-ups happen in a timely manner. Now, on the next several slides, what we had done, like I said earlier, was ask people to send in examples of what they look at for their management review. And there were some fundamental characteristics we were trying to look at of how often do you hold management review? Who's there? What do you have on the agenda? Every organization did it a little differently. So for the frequency, a lot of people seem to have their management reviews quarterly. In one company, they have quarterly reviews at individual sites across regions and at executive level. But they're also trying to take and shorten that time. Another company used a tiered approach where they had a quality review board every month, and then that information would get rolled up and presented to executive management 2 times a year. We asked people who participates. So the 1-month company said supervisors, managers, and directors would show up every month, and the executives would be director and VP level only. Another company had, an example of, depending on what kind of review, executive, regional, or individual manufacturing sites, who is required attendees and who are optional attendees. Again, there is no one best approach. It's just different companies have found different things that take and work for them. Many companies talked about having layered reviews, monthly reviews as well as a quarterly review and perhaps a biannual review. And so one company shared their flowchart for site reviews versus region reviews, and the shaded parts show what the tie is between those and the executive review. Companies shared agenda topics, and I'm not going to read the 30 ideas to you, but this is another one of those examples of take a look through, see what other companies are doing, and maybe it makes sense for the kind of review that you're doing, that bullet point might be something that you would be interested in. Specific advice that came back from one company talking about the agenda, this is a direct quote from them, is just taking a look at how well they're doing and what is driving a metric to be off target. The conversation will go very, very deep into something. You got something on a heat map, you got something that you flagged in red. Be prepared for a lot of questions because someone's going to want to take and drill down on all of that. You need to have some of those backup details there to be able to take and present. As well as the agenda topics, we also ask people separately, what are some metrics that you take and gather and are presenting? Management review is more than just metrics, but certainly metrics are a big piece. And so again, here's a nice little shopping list that you can take and use and pick and choose which ones make the most sense for you. Some additional advice in collecting those metrics. In the example that I had before, as well as other people's experience, you're never going to get a perfect metric. Start with the things that you can collect and see what you need, see where you need to spend the time to take and revise and get some more details. Take action on the lagging metrics. I thought this one was very interesting. If it's important enough of a metric to collect, then it's important enough for you to act on. And I also kind of like thinking of the opposite way of telling me whether or not a metric is good. If I see something out of bounds, am I going to act on it? If I'm not, then I probably don't need to be collecting that metric. And then finally, sort of back to the theater concept, is not allowing individual sites, individual parts of the organization to game the system. A challenge with metrics is that they are a proxy measure to overall product quality, and as a proxy, they can be rigged to show you a different picture than what's really going on with the product, and so obviously you need to be sensitive to that. Some example content for a charter, talking about the purpose, some definitions, writing down the policy, outlining some of the participants' roles and responsibilities, et cetera. And the idea here is to help better communicate exactly what's going to go on in the management review and how things should go. You need to write it down. You need to have these things documented ahead of time so people know what to take and look for. I also grabbed some example templates that we had in the white paper. As I said, people had taken and shared some of their real-world examples. We don't have any doctored up numbers in any of these, so that's why a lot of these just take and show up blank. But for example, one company uses a graphic like this to talk about how their performance is over time for internal audits. And then they even have sort of an open action item list as a table as part of this review. Another company, apologize for the font being so small on the WebEx here, but you can see some of the metrics that they have, such as CAPA effectiveness, talking about field actions, FCA execution timeliness, et cetera. And then breaking it down into subgroups, breaking it down into regions, rolling it up into company-wide metrics, and then using colors so they can show you the heat of where some of the issues are. An example of how one company takes and documents issues that are being escalated from one business group to a higher group or across different regional controls. Another company just using a Foursquare, trying to, at a high level, communicating things such as how our inspection's going, how our field action's going. You had various initiatives that we fired off in the past, what's their relative health, and then how are things doing on a regulatory side of the business. I would also expect with something like that, anything you highlight, you're going to be asked about the details behind things if things aren't green. So getting started with improving the management review process is really all about trying to make that demand. Is raising awareness that you really need a formal management review process, and it needs to be a good one. So, of course, plug for us, exposing senior leadership to this case for quality is one way that you can take and do that sell. Also, based on the previous presentation, translating those quality issues into what it's costing, into what investments could be made. Obviously, we think that that's part of the business case that you can do. You start laying the groundwork, you build that charter, start defining those metrics and reporting processes, and you build your own templates for holding the management review. Also remember that this isn't a one-time thing. You're going to have people coming on board that are new to the team, other people get rotated back off, and so you're going to have regular communications and training for folks with their new responsibilities. Oops, sorry. So some advice on getting started and holding a pilot. A couple different approaches the companies had taken. One company performed a dry run. So they tested the whole process end to end. they had some dummy metrics. They had some straw man reports with some issues highlighted, and even had an abbreviated meeting simulation where everyone went through, made sure the process was working for them. That's the kind of data that they wanted to see, presented in that format. I know different stakeholders like to see things in different ways. Understanding those user needs of your stakeholders, I think it's really important in making sure that you do have good communication with them. Other companies said, you know, no, we jumped right in. We took the time to collect the metrics. We ran it through the analysis. It wasn't a dry run. These were all live numbers. We put together the dashboards. We know that people are going to want something slightly different. We know there's going to be hiccups along the way. So we might set a goal for a certain amount of timeliness every quarter, but we know that because we're just starting out with this new process and we're trying to collect live data, it's probably going to take a while longer. Some of the initial management reviews aren't going to have the timing that we really want them to have ultimately, because we're piloting the system. And then finally, one thing that I learned a lot with these is making sure the team understands that they shouldn't stay in their normal lines of functions and silos and expense reporting. Back to my very first example of reducing call center costs. Like I said, if I'd stayed inside of my normal reporting structure, I couldn't justify making that change because it wasn't my cost center being hit by those complaints. It was someone else's cost center. And so it needed me to reach out across that silo to make the business case.
So,
and,
Pat,
so with that, oh, yes, sir.
I just wanted to add one thing. You know, whether we're talking cost to poor quality or whether we're looking at management review, basically what we're doing is shining a light on quality, both successes and failures. And I think that companies should not underestimate the cultural dimension of this, that you need to have a culture of continuous improvement and an organizational will to raise all players in achieving effective quality improvement. If there's a culture of recrimination, that gaming the system that you described earlier, Pat, is going to be a real problem, because people are not going to want to see the truth if the truth ends in termination or other punishment. So I think laying the groundwork from a cultural perspective is just as important as enabling this from a technology or process perspective.
Good point. Thank you.
And with that, I think we should open it up if anyone has questions. I think either Pat is happy to answer.
Thank you both. And yeah, if you have questions, please feel free to submit them in the either in the Q&A box or the chat box on your screen. And I'm pulling up questions right now. So bear with me for just a moment so I get the right box up on the screen. There we go.
I mean, one question while we're waiting, Stephanie, is how can people access either the white paper or the dashboard? Are they all available at that link right there?
Yes, so I unintentionally advanced the slide, but hey, it was the right one. If you log on to the Resource Center for Sustained Quality as part of MDIC's website, you can download the papers, and I believe the dashboard is on there. If not, Pat will make sure and get that up this afternoon.
Great.
And I will make mention as well, I've had a couple people ask that there are, we did record today's session and we will be posting the video, but we can make slides available as well. I guess I'll open with questions, and perhaps either one of you can maybe touch base on kind of what our vision for what we're going to do next with this work. I know we're soliciting feedback.
Well, I'll jump in first. We are going to do additional webinars to raise awareness. The white papers, as you mentioned, Stephanie, are available for review. If people find additional evidence or ideas to improve those, the white papers, just as any good product, should be open to a continuous improvement. We want to make this up to date and as good as possible. The competency working group will probably also move on to other competency areas that need support within the industry. So we're not going to stop with cost of poor quality and management review, but perhaps look at some other areas where we can provide some benefit. Pat, did you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, you covered the points that I have written down in front of me.
Terrific, and I do want to mention, for the benefit of those of you on the line as well, MDIC is currently in the process of kind of scoping out our project priorities for the larger Case for Quality initiative in 2017. And this is somewhat of a unique project to MDIC because of the historical involvement and kind of the historical participation of a couple of key groups, including CDRH has their own Case for Quality initiative internally within the agency, and also AdvaMed has a terrific resource for successful practices and quality as well. So my goal coming into this as kind of a fresh program manager is to really look to identify ways where the three of those groups can interact and work in ways that are complementary as we continue to advance the Case for Quality. Well, I don't see any additional questions that have come in. Certainly, if there are additional follow-up questions on the center, the Case for Quality website, there is contact information to be able to both share feedback on this webinar, but also to share feedback on those two white papers as well. I want to thank Pat Baird and Pat Shafer for presenting today, and also I know thank the work of the many contributors to the working group and the members of the Competencies Working Group for all of the work that they've done on this. And I look forward to continuing to help refine these and to really make these into useful tools that our members and others in the medical devices ecosystem can learn from and implement within their own practices.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.